Hello and welcome to the second episode of the mini-series where European journalists travel to Ukraine. My name is Sarah Lepers, and in this episode we're trying to answer some of the questions from the first, as well as pose some new ones for our future selves. I'm joined by Flora-Dora Czatari, a Hungarian journalist, and Elena Gorgis, a German radio journalist. Flora-Dora worked for the weekly newspaper Havege when we recorded this interview in Kyiv in February 2024. But since, she has moved to another role for the Hungarian Civil Liberties Union. With her sits Elena, whose voice and questions you have heard in the previous episode. She's a freelancer for German public radio and was working on an audio documentary about rescuing the cultural heritage of Ukraine while in Kyiv with us. They are both fellows of the Europe-Ukraine desk. In this episode, we delve into our experiences from the trip, the emotional highs and lows, and the resilience we've witnessed. We also revisit our discussions from the panels we attended with Ukrainian journalists, who shared critiques about the role of foreign media in covering the war in Ukraine. It is fair to say that there are some tensions between the urgent need for unity and the journalistic imperative to hold power to account, even in times of conflicts. Flora and Elena will provide insights into these panels where we faced both solidarity and frustration. We'll explore how these interactions have challenged our understanding of our roles as journalists in a war zone and what it means to support our Ukrainian colleagues effectively. Also, Elena seems to find the answers to the questions she posed on the train to Kyiv. Why is she even here? And how come Ukrainians stood up against Russia? We wanted to conduct this interview in a nice quiet room, as we normally would, but an air raid alert forced us to go down to the shelter, which was a parking lot. So there are some cars and other people around, and we are trying not to speak too loudly. There will also be some unexpected sounds. It's a thorough conversation, which we start by justifying our actions.
Yeah, and also the decision to go to a shelter is a tricky one here. I think you can act cool and not go like the Ukrainians. They are so used to it. And I think they also decided that their lives should not be disturbed all the time by this. But I think it's a different perspective when you only come for 2 weeks, because for me it's not such a disturbance, we can have the setup easily here in the shelter, and I feel very secure. And when I have to interrupt everything that I do only for 2 weeks, it's an easy decision.
So we had our first 3 or 4 days here without any air raids, which was amazing, I guess, because we could sleep through the whole night. And then we had our first early morning air raid, and I was like, okay, so this is a day when we do not get to sleep. And then we had a really full day program-wise, so it was okay, so that's the everyday experience of Ukrainians.
I have some specific questions and also general questions. Let's start with the general questions. How are you feeling, and did you learn some things during this week?
This week was really heavy on me. Obviously, I have some topics that I would like to cover, and I prepared them, but my plan was really to feel something here in Ukraine, and I definitely did.
I'm constantly between feelings of euphoria and happiness. I can explain why, but also devastation, sadness. I think it's a mix of... we have an intensive program, but also, is it the right word, deprivation of sleep?
Yes.
Lack of sleep. And the euphoria and the happiness comes when I, for example, when I can understand some Ukrainian, or when I can read some Ukrainian, when I can get along in the underground, arriving on time at the right spot. And also when I meet these wonderful people we have met, intelligent, smart, dedicated, resilient people. Also when I see things that make me really happy, like seeing the Western lifestyle that not only comes with consuming things, but also with enjoying freedom and share the same values that we have. And then, of course, there are the moments of total devastation, like when you have the feeling there's no hope or it's not going all right on the front lines. There are not enough people who want to fight. And also when you are not prepared for a situation. For example, we had this moment yesterday when we were in Chernihiv. In Chernihiv, there was a story about a child being in the cellar for more than 40 days, and his mother only had one package of cookies, and she tried to make it last as long as it gets. And as a mother, I really had to fight to hold back the tears, because when I'm prepared as a journalist, I know I get into the situation and there will be sad or tragic or horrible stories. You know what you are going into. You prepare yourself, but when this comes up all of a sudden, you're not prepared, and then you're a human being, not a journalist anymore.
So I was tearing up in Chernihiv at different locations when we visited the woman who lost her house due to bombardment, and she had this really suggestive presence. You could see every emotion on her face. So when she was explaining the tragedy of losing a house that was built by many generations to be a family home, she was also tearing up. And then when we were inside the house that they started to rebuild, she was really proud, not just for herself and for her family, but also the local community that helps her to rebuild her house. And she was like really smiling and leading up. It was so quick of a change, and I had all these emotions in me. And I was also wondering whether it is okay that I was sort of on a fence of crying as a journalist, because as you said, usually I try to prepare myself and I try to be like more, observing. But at that time, it felt right to be emotional, because I guess the empathy was a strong bridge between us. And then there was this really sweet moment, because she is a nail technician, and I asked if she did her nails, and she showed me, and I was able to picture it. And then she realized my nails, and she said it's a really nice work, and we had this connection. And she also said that she would like to send her regards to my nail technician in Budapest, and it was just like amazing.
So you describe perfectly my constant roller coaster between feeling happiness and really lovely moments and being sad and close to tears. And I think, that's what this trip is about.
I offered you to be here together, also to speak to go back to a discussion we had over breakfast a few days ago. If I remember well, it was a discussion about a panel discussion that was organized and that we all attended. We actually had two panel discussions with journalists Ukrainian journalists talking about their work. There was one first panel about general coverage of the news at the moment and the war, which is at the center of the news in Ukraine. And while I remember, these journalists shared about their practices, but also a lot about the critics that they send over to foreign journalists and Western journalists. And if I recall well, it's something that made you rose questions and in you. And also there was a second panel about investigative journalism in Ukraine, where the same critics were formulated in a different way, but also where we could also see journalists working about corruption in Ukraine, which opened a new door. And there was a discussion, a topic that rose up during that one. So you can start with whatever you want, whatever was more striking to you, but I wanted you to share what you felt and what you understood from these discussions.
To me, the first panel was a bit hard to feel deeply connected to, because it felt superficial, because I think it's a really hard job to find your position during wartime as a journalist, because as journalists we are usually used to the idea that we need to act like watchdogs on power, but when you have a war in your country, you have this feeling that the whole country needs to unite, and there must be somebody, usually the government, who tells you what to do and what not to do, and where's the room for doing the journalistic work then. So that was my main interest. And the first panel didn't really touch on those topics in my understanding, because when we asked about their dilemmas, they were just like explaining really basic stuff, which is not hard to understand. They were really detailed about, like, going to the front lines and not showing where they are and why it is important. And I guess you do not have to be a journalist to understand that.
Even if some foreign journalists actually did the mistake to keep the geolocation on their phone while taking picture and publishing them on social networks.
Do you always have a geolocation on your photo?
So not always. I know mine are always not on the picture, but you should check the settings of your phone.
You need to deliberately turn off.
So every time you forward a picture, it's still there, the geolocation?
In the metadata, there is a lot of information.
Oh.
One of the information would be where you are when you take the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be as specific as the street, the number of the street where you stand.
Well, I think I've never been to the front line, so if I would go, I would prepare. Good to know. Good to know. And there was the second panel, and I think there were 5 investigative journalists and then one who moderated it.
Yeah.
And I think they had kind of chemistry between them. They all knew each other. They are quite young, I think, and they all achieved a lot in a very short period of time. They're working a lot, and they had big stories. They have an international audience who reads their stories on a almost daily basis. So they had quite a lot of confidence, and there was a lot of critique against the Western media, and I can understand this critique. And on a personal level, I felt like this needed to come out, and we were just there, and so they confronted us with this, and I'm fine with that. I can cope. I mean, after 2 years of war, I think you can get angry with your colleagues in other countries who are not doing a good job. But on a professional level, I have to criticize that they were not precise. I think there is nothing like the Western media, like there's not the Ukraine or the Ukrainian journalists. And if you criticize something, you have to be really specific, because I think they were preaching maybe to the wrong audience. We are here to learn, to reach out, and we are here because we are interested. And maybe we are also fighting a fight at home in our editorial offices against our colleagues who are maybe not that interested in Ukraine, or maybe we also have financial issues. It's not easy to finance foreign stories. And I was asking a question of how I'm trying to do a collaborative project, and I was asking what would help, what are the things I should look out to, how can we be better in the future. And there was coming no answer, just one answer that
Hungarian
journalists are bad
and should confront their president with reactions.
Can you maybe explain this precise situation that came up?
The situation was one of the investigative journalists worked on a project that had some ties to Hungary, and she sent a request to Hungarian journalists to try to get a comment from Viktor Orbán, our prime minister. And he's a prime minister that haven't given any interviews to the free part of the Hungarian press in the last 12 years, I guess. So he's really hard to reach, especially not doing there's this one issue and please give me one comment. And I guess there was a misunderstanding between the Ukrainian and the Hungarian part of this story because the Ukrainian journalist felt really strongly that it is the fault of the Hungarian journalist that there was no comment from Viktor Orbán. And I guess I felt a bit personally attacked by that because I tried to explain the situation to her, maybe to help her to understand how hard in Hungary is to reach anybody from the government, even in lower levels. But, that was maybe not the right time to have a discussion on that, because that was a panel session where we were the audience and we were just prepared for asking questions and not really, standing up to our point of view. It was strange to me because, as Elena said, they were really hostile to us, and I was okay with that. And I also think that we needed to hear the harsh critique. And I also appreciated that they felt a lot more real with their critics and point of views than the first panel. So up until that point, I was completely fine with their attitude, even though they had they were on their phones and having inside jokes. I guess that's a part of coping with the hard times that they need to be living and need to working on. But when it came to the situation in Hungary, I felt I'm the expert. I'm someone coming from that culture. I'm the one who's fighting the good fight, or at least I'm trying to believe that I'm fighting the good fight back in home. So it felt a bit rude that there was no room for discussion, especially no room for listening to the experience that we have, and I was sad about it because I was not really able to discuss this topic in a productive way.
And also, I think it can be also a way of being patronizing. If you say, okay, they are criticizing us in a harsh way, but we don't say anything about it because it's war, it's not, communication is not a one-way street. Everybody has to open up and try to be constructive. Is this only
Yes.
German way?
Yeah.
Word? To be constructive, to think forward. What do we want to achieve? Where are the things that we are united? And also, I had the feeling that there were, I think you can be a little bit isolated. This situation is so existential. I also have the feeling when there's air alert and I go to the shelter and then then it's over, I come to my room, I have a shower, I put on the radio, and then I want to listen to news about Ukraine because it seems so urgent. I'm here, I want to have it solved. I hear all these stories. It's hard to be interested in something else. But outside of Ukraine, things are going on. People go on with their lives, politics is taking place. And I think because they are stuck in the situation, they cannot travel abroad, they cannot allow themselves to have interest in other news stories because what's happening here is so much more urgent. But then it's kind of in isolation when everybody around you, outside of Ukraine, is living their life and you are stuck in the situation. It's hard to find common ground. But I think it's very important to reach out to each other, try to understand the other person and not always be...
Attention. Air alert checkpoint is set off. Stay safe.
Okay, we're gonna finish this interview here, but
I just want to finish the sentence.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have the sound
Me too.
recorded. I think it's important not to mistrust the other person in the moment you meet them. You have to trust that the other person next to you is also caring, exactly, and maybe having the same aims like you have. Maybe you will disagree in some points, and you can argue about that. You can take your time, and you can have professional fights about things, but it should not get in the way of collaborating.
Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention a very important part of the story, that it was not just a misunderstanding on how things work in Hungary, but also there was this huge pressure coming from most of the panelists. They were in that position that they are doing right journalism, and they were really condescending to us, and they were trying to do how to do our job in our country, which I guess they do not know much about based on their experiences. So I guess it is really important. It was not just they didn't get us, they also tried to teach us how to do our job, and their basis was like they are in a pedestal, because being a journalist at wartime, it's extremely hard, and they even decided to fight an even harder challenge, because they started to cover not just the Russian war crimes, but also trying to investigate the corruption scandals still happening in Ukraine. So they are trying not just to be checks on the Russian oppressor, but also on their own government, which is really impressive. And I completely agree that I do not want to fall into the mistake that they can do whatever they want to just because their situation is so hard. But I would be absolutely fine with their attitude, being angry and even aggressive and really rough with us. But then I would expect them to be really open-minded when it comes to our experience. So if they can be rough and harsh in their way of, forming an opinion on us, then it would be even nicer to find listening ears as well.
And also some inspiration. I mean, I don't want to be applauded to be here for 2 weeks. Nobody has to be friendly to me, It's okay, but let's have the professional discussions. If they have to criticize something, they should be precise so that we can talk about it.
I think it's very relevant what you say, and it comes in the context of how this discussion started. It was you asking, Elena, you asked a very constructive question, actually. You said, so how can we behave in a constructive way so that we can collaborate together? What is the behavior that you're expecting from foreign journalists to work with you? And
or what is helpful.
So your question was that, and the answer was what you just described. So it was not concrete about what you asked.
Yeah, but it was also a lot of examples what we didn't do right, and a lot of counter examples what they did do right. So it was we have Ukrainian journalists who know what to do, and all the other journalists in the room who have no clue. And that's not a position where it's easy to learn anything from each other.
Or maybe they think that the Western media, I'm quoting now, we always have they would say, come on, guys, stop whining. You have a comfortable, privileged position. And yeah, maybe we have, but probably it's not that privileged as they think. Because journalism everywhere is about getting financed, to go out there and report. You are never the rich person when you really want to find investigative stories or critical stories. You're not the rich person of the society. And also, you're under pressure, also in other countries. because it's maybe political not convenient what you write. So I think we should back each other up. And when you have it hard at your home and you have it hard here, you can start feeling like, come on, guys, maybe I quit because, what's the use of it? Where am I? Where's my common ground? Where are the people who are backing me up? Sometimes I feel like I'd really like to find people that I can rely on. I have people I can rely on, and these are the people I had my education with, because we were such a young group, and I think we are now connected for life. And I think in journalism you need this. We are so used as journalists to fight on our own, and I think we should be a generation or many generations that come who work together.
It also took me some days to realize after those two panels that a lot of the source for the anger was that Ukrainian politicians, the Ukrainian government is a lot more accessible to foreign journalists than it would be for Ukrainian journalists. And I guess it's something that, as Elena said, would be solvable if we would have more solidarity to each other and if we had stronger connections between us, because I can totally imagine a situation when there is somebody from the Ukrainian government who would speak to a foreigner journalist, and then the journalist can, team up with Ukrainians who know the questions that said politician wouldn't want to answer. And maybe that can be one way to trick the system and also empower each other. However, it took me like 2 days to figure this out, because I needed to be away from that not really constructive situation to figure this out.
Is there a possibility that it's just very hard to have a real discussion, and it's even like between two different point of views, and that it's even harder when you have to be in a fighter position for your life and for your work? So these, to come back to this panel with investigative journalists, they are fighting against their own government, like this is what they explained, in their own state, fighting for truth. And they are also Ukrainians, as many of them said. It may even come before being a journalist, being a Ukrainian. And all Ukrainians at the moment are fighting for their freedom. And so maybe it leaves little place for elasticity of discussion and dialogue.
Definitely. That's why I try to be really understanding about it. But I guess it would be also fruitful for them to realize that we are not the enemy, because then they could find some strength in the journalistic community, not just in their own country, but also finding allies maybe across the borders.
I think you have to take in account this long history of colonization. I mean, we as Germans, for example, were never aware of that there is something like Ukraine. We always said Russia. When we learned some Slavic language, we learned Russian. And we had Russian theater, and we had Russian movies, and we had Russian books, and we had all this kind of Russian culture, yeah. So I think they're still trying to teach us that there is Ukraine and there's an Ukrainian perspective. And of course, there is some anger. And of course, I'm like the representative of this system, this colonial system. It's hard to overcome it in 2 years, or even in 30 years, or in 10 years. So everything is still new. And I think on a personal level, when you are not in the situation, here's the panel and we are the journalists, on a personal level, when I have a personal conversation, I find it much more easy to get connected to somebody.
It's also worth mentioning that they were really effective if their mission was to make us really think about our position. So it was not a comfortable way of doing so, but I guess it's not their job to make us feel comfortable.
Is there anything to add to this topic of meeting Ukrainian journalists?
If I can add another topic, to me it was really empowering to see all the female soldiers that we were able to meet, because they also represented a really nuanced understanding of the wartime situation here. A lot of the panels were like really focusing on getting the right message to us. So they were like really one-sided, or at least they felt one-sided, when we have the heroic Ukrainian nation battling against their oppressors, doing it in a really brave way. But I guess the everyday life in Ukraine is a lot more different. So I really appreciated every chance that we get to know the challenges that they also face beside being at war. And the female soldiers were speaking about why they are fighting. They were really clear that their main goal is to protect their country, their culture, all the Ukrainians. And they were also speaking a lot about they are doing such a huge service for the whole continent, and they are protecting every other nation against Russia, which is a really important point. But they were also speaking about how they are mistreated in the army, how there is a lot of violence and there is like sexism in the army. So they were basically speaking about also like the investigative journalist fighting two fights at once, even though when they have to fight against the army, the military, it's a super hard one, because it's easy to say that it's not the right time to do that. So let us first win the war, and then we will face the issue of sexism and the place of female soldiers in the military. However, I really like that one of the panelists said that we are fighting for a country that is worth to fight for, and that's something that I will bring back home with me.
When you said they were describing some discriminations or some stuff, it's actually when people show you their weaknesses or some weaknesses, finally you think, oh, I can trust that person because, okay, she has shown me a weakness, so I can understand and believe the strength and the other stuff that she's saying.
They became real because you get both sides of the story, and also make you feel that they trusted you. So it's also a deeper connection, because with the really one-sided messages that we get, it was like a bit patronizing to us, because it was like if we didn't get the right version of the right message, just the right version of the right message, then we would, do harm because we couldn't frame the situation well if we knew the details, which is like, it's not a flattering view on you as a journalist, because we mostly do this job that we have all the facts and we try to put them in the right framework.
You had great expectations coming here, and I know, Elena, because we were together in the same cabin on the train, that you had a lot of images in your mind, and you have been working for so long on Ukraine. It was so important for you to see it. Did you find something you did not expect?
Now I remember you asked me, we had this discussion why I wanted to come to Ukraine, why I'm emotionally attached to Ukraine, and I wanted to find the answer. Maybe I didn't have time to think about that through the days, but I think maybe I found an answer. I think people here are still believing in freedom. And I think sometimes I feel in my own nation we are so fed up. We are so we take it for granted, you know. We are not realizing that there's really somebody out there, or not only one person, but some dictators, who don't want it this way. And we probably have to come to terms with the thought that we have to fight for it, whatever that means for yourself. And I think I found it very inspirational that somebody finally stood up against evil and said, not with me, you're not having it. Not giving in. And I think it makes a huge difference to be here. It's never like you imagine it, like you've imagined it. And I also had the thought, because we thought about quitting journalism, when we had this panel with the organizations who take care of families of soldiers or veterans, I thought to myself, wow, this is a useful thing. Maybe I could also find peace in doing something like this in Germany, you know, preparing for the fight, because maybe it will come. Be ready, start an organization. I mean, to be a journalist is always useful. You can always say, you know, I'm already a journalist, I'm doing topics on that thing, but maybe also be active in the civil society. And this is something I take with me.
Wow, this is so insightful. Thanks a lot for sharing all this. You both.
Pleasure.
Thank you for organizing the program.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You hear a discussion between two of our fellows, Flora-Dora Czatari from Hungary and Elena Gorgis from Germany. This episode was recorded in the underground car park of our hotel in Kyiv by me, Sarah Lepers, and written together with Daniel Bilik, who also edited, sound designed, and mixed this episode. Proofreading was by Michael Bird. The views expressed by the characters are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the organization they work for, nor n-ost, or the European Commission who funded this project. The podcast covering Ukraine was created as part of the Europe-Ukraine Desk, a program that aims at creating bridges between journalists from the EU and Ukrainian journalists. Please let us know what you think via email. The address is eud@n-ost.org. You will also find it in the description of the episode. For now, this is it. Take care.
Attention, the air alert is over. May the force be with you.